What if one of those old Kennedy half dollars sitting in your drawer, coin jar, or collection is worth far more than the 50 cents stamped on it? Before you spend another Kennedy half dollar, stop and check the date, the mint mark, the condition, and especially those tiny details that most people never notice. Welcome back to Hidden Coin Millions. Today we're looking at 6 Kennedy half dollars that deserve a serious second look. Some come from historic years, some carry important mint marks, and some have survived decades of circulation while keeping surprisingly attractive surfaces. And the most interesting part? These coins can look completely ordinary until you know exactly what to look for. We're talking about Kennedy half dollars from 1964, 1966, 1969, 1974, 1980, and 1985. These coins carry stories from different moments in American history, and collectors continue searching for exceptional examples. So before you throw an old half dollar into a spending pile, take it out and look closely. Check Kennedy's portrait. Check the date. Check beneath the portrait for the mint mark, or notice when there isn't one. Then examine the surfaces for wear, scratches, discoloration, and original detail. Because here's the danger. Many people unknowingly spend coins they should have examined first. And today, we're going through all 6 coins one by one, starting with a Kennedy half dollar that could make you look twice at an ordinary-looking piece of American change. So stay with me, because you absolutely do not want to miss what makes these 6 Kennedy half dollars worth checking. Do not spend these coins. Do not clean them. Protect those original surfaces and check your collection right now. Let's begin. Coin number 1. We're talking about the 1969 Kennedy half dollar with the D mint mark, a coin that has been sitting quietly in collections, old jars, and inherited coin boxes for decades. And if you happen to have an attractive original example, you may be holding something collectors would want to examine very carefully. The Kennedy half dollar has a powerful story behind it. It was created to honor President John F. Kennedy after his assassination, and by 1969, America was living through one of the most dramatic periods of the 20th century. The country was deep into the Vietnam era. Richard Nixon had just entered the White House, and Americans were watching history unfold as the space race pushed toward the moon. That same year, Apollo 11 would make its historic lunar landing. So when you hold a 1969 Kennedy half dollar, you're holding a small piece of that extraordinary American moment. On the front, you'll see John F. Kennedy facing left, based on the famous presidential portrait. Around him are the inscriptions, "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date, 1969. Look closely below the neck area, and you'll find the D mint mark, identifying the Denver Mint as the facility that produced this coin. Turn it over, and the reverse features the presidential seal, an eagle holding arrows with an olive branch beneath it, surrounded by stars. You'll also see the inscriptions United States of America, half dollar, and E pluribus unum. Now let's talk about what this coin is made of. The 1969 Kennedy half dollar uses a 40% silver composition, with the remaining metal primarily copper. It weighs approximately 12.5 grams, measures about 30.6 millimeters across, and is approximately 2.15 millimeters thick. The edge is reeded, giving you those familiar grooves around the coin. The D mint mark matters because it tells you this particular piece came from Denver. The 1969 with D issue was produced in substantial numbers, but that doesn't mean every surviving example looks the same today. Decades of circulation, scratches, handling, environmental exposure, and improper cleaning can dramatically change the appearance and collector appeal of an individual coin. And that brings us to the detail collectors notice first. Condition. Look closely at Kennedy's portrait. The hair, cheek, jawline, and the highest points of the design. Then inspect the reverse, especially the eagle and surrounding details. Brown spots, surface discoloration, scratches, heavy wear, and signs of cleaning can all affect desirability. Those original surfaces matter, especially when a coin has remained attractive despite its age. Now comes the part that makes this coin worth a much closer look. Based on the market value you provided, a Kennedy $50 1969 with the D mint mark can be valued at approximately $60,000 compared with its original face value of just 50 cents. That is an enormous difference, and any coin being considered at that level deserves serious professional examination. Collectors look at preservation, surviving examples, originality, historical importance, and demand when determining what an individual specimen may command. A coin at this stated valuation would certainly deserve professional attention before any sale or auction decision. Collectors continue searching for attractive original examples, and high-value coins are typically examined carefully before being offered to serious buyers. So if you have a 1969 with D. Kennedy $50, do not spend this coin. Never clean it. Do not polish those brown spots or try to make the surface look newer. Original surfaces matter, and aggressive cleaning can permanently damage the coin and reduce its collector appeal. Handle it by the edges, keep it protected, and professional grading may be worthwhile if the coin appears especially attractive. So check those old $50 again. That forgotten Kennedy sitting in your collection may deserve far more attention than you thought. And remember, many people unknowingly spend old coins without ever realizing what they should have checked first. Comment Rare Coins Hunter if you're still watching. I want to know who the real treasure hunters are. Coin number 2. Now, after looking at that earlier Kennedy $50, let's slow down and take a closer look at another date that can easily be overlooked. Imagine finding a 1974 Kennedy $50 with no mint mark, grey dots across the surface, and a beautiful, very fine appearance. At first glance, it may look like just another 50-cent piece, but this is exactly the kind of coin collectors want to examine closely before deciding what it is really worth. The 1974 Kennedy $50 came at an interesting moment in American history. The country was dealing with the aftermath of the Vietnam War. Inflation was becoming a major concern, and President Richard Nixon was in the White House. Just 1 year later, America would celebrate its bicentennial preparations with the upcoming special coin designs. So this coin represents the final stretch of the regular Kennedy $50 design before that major change. The Kennedy $50 itself carries an emotional history. After President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, the United States Mint moved quickly to place his portrait on a circulating coin. By 1974, the design had already become one of America's most recognizable modern coin designs. On the obverse, Kennedy faces left, with the inscriptions, "Liberty, in God we trust," and the date, 1974. Since this example has no mint mark, it indicates production at the Philadelphia Mint. That absence is not an error. The Philadelphia Mint normally used no mint mark on this issue. More than 201 million examples were produced there for circulation. Flip the coin over, and you'll see the presidential seal, featuring an eagle, holding arrows, and an olive branch, surrounded by stars. Around the design are the inscriptions United States of America, $50, and E pluribus unum. The reverse was designed by Frank Gasparo, while the Kennedy portrait was designed by Gilroy Roberts. And here's something important about this date. The 1974 Kennedy $50 is not a silver half-dollar. It uses a copper-nickel-clad composition, 75% copper and 25% nickel over a pure copper center. It weighs about 11.34 grams, measures approximately 30.61 millimeters in diameter, and is about 2.15 millimeters thick. The edge is reeded with approximately 150 reeds. Now look closely at the gray dots mentioned on this example. Don't automatically assume discoloration means rarity. Instead, collectors examine the entire surface. They look for original luster, distracting marks, scratches, wear on Kennedy's hair and cheek, clarity of the lettering, and the condition of the reverse. A beautiful, very fine example can be much more appealing than a heavily damaged coin, but condition must always be judged carefully. And now comes the number that makes this Kennedy half-dollar worth another look. From an original face value of only 50 cents, a 1974 Kennedy half-dollar with no mint mark, like the example we're discussing, can be valued at approximately $43,590 in today's collector market. Collectors consider preservation, surviving examples, historical significance, and demand. So if you discover one, keep it exactly as you found it. Never clean or damage it. Auction records also show why condition matters so much. High-grade 1974 Philadelphia examples can bring dramatically different prices depending on their certified grade, with PCGS recording an auction result of $8,000 for an MS-68 example. That does not mean every 1974 half-dollar is worth thousands. It means serious collectors pay extremely close attention to exceptional preservation. So before you put one of these coins back into circulation, inspect it carefully. Check the date, confirm there is no mint mark beneath Kennedy's portrait, examine both surfaces under good lighting, and look at the edge. Do not spend this coin. Never clean it. Original surfaces matter, and if your example truly appears unusually attractive, professional grading may be worthwhile. Keep checking those old Kennedy half-dollars, because the next coin in this series could have another story hiding in plain sight, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Coin number 3. Here's a Kennedy half-dollar that proves why you should never judge an old coin by its age alone. Take a close look at this 1985 Kennedy half-dollar with the D mint mark. It has black dots, signs of circulation, and an older circulated appearance, but don't let that make you put it aside too quickly. Sometimes the first thing collectors want to know is not how perfect a coin looks, but exactly what coin they're looking at, and whether anything about its condition makes it worth a closer examination. The 1985 Kennedy half-dollar came during a very different America. Ronald Reagan was president. The Cold War was still shaping world politics, and the American economy was moving through a period of major change. It was also an era when Kennedy half-dollars were produced in relatively modest quantities compared with many other U.S. denominations, and they were not commonly seen in everyday transactions. This coin continues the Kennedy design created after President John F. Kennedy's assassination. On the obverse, Kennedy faces left, surrounded by the inscriptions "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date 1985. Under the portrait, look for the small D mint mark. That identifies the Denver Mint. Turn it over, and the reverse shows the presidential seal, with the eagle holding arrows and an olive branch surrounded by stars. Around it are the inscriptions United States of America, half-dollar, and E pluribus unum. The Kennedy portrait was designed by Gilroy Roberts, while the reverse was designed by Frank Gasparo. And here's something important about this particular date. The 1985 with D Kennedy half-dollar was made from copper-nickel-clad metal, a copper-nickel outer layer over a pure copper center. It weighs about 11.3 grams, measures approximately 30.6 millimeters across, and has a reeded edge with about 150 reeds. The Denver Mint produced 19,814,034 examples. That production number is important because we need to be realistic about rarity. This is a standard issue coin, not a rare error or unusual variety. PCGS describes the 1985 with D as a common issue in ordinary grades, with significant scarcity appearing mainly in extremely high mint state grades. So if you find one in circulated condition, its appearance alone does not automatically make it rare. But that doesn't mean you should ignore it. Those black dots deserve a careful look. Are they simply environmental discoloration? Are there scratches underneath them? Has the coin been cleaned? How much detail remains in Kennedy's hair, cheek, and jaw? On the reverse, examine the eagle, feathers, lettering, and high points for wear. Collectors inspect these areas because condition can dramatically separate an ordinary example from an exceptional one. Now comes the number that makes this particular coin worth a much closer look. From an original face value of only 50 cents, a Kennedy half-dollar 1985 with the D mint mark, like the example you provided, is valued at approximately $35,750 in today's collector market. Collectors look closely at preservation, surviving examples, historical significance, and demand. So if you have one, keep it untouched and avoid cleaning or damaging the coin. There is an important reality check here. Documented auction results for certified examples can be far lower. PCGS records a $3,250 auction record for an exceptionally graded MS-68 example, while other certified high-grade examples have sold for much less. That's exactly why professional authentication and grading are so important when a claimed market value is unusually high. So if you discover a 1985 with D. Kennedy half-dollar, don't spend this coin. Never clean it. Those black dots may look unattractive, but original surfaces matter, and cleaning can permanently damage a coin's collector appeal. Handle it by the edges, protect it from further damage, and if you believe your example is exceptional, professional grading may be worthwhile. Check your old half-dollars carefully. That small D under Kennedy's portrait is easy to overlook, and sometimes the smallest details are exactly what tell you where your coin came from. And don't stop checking, because the next Kennedy half-dollar in this series could have another story waiting to be uncovered. Coin number 4. Here's a Kennedy half-dollar that can fool you in the best possible way. It doesn't have a flashy mint mark. It doesn't need an unusual error to get your attention, and its black and brown layer may make it look like a coin that has simply spent decades sitting around. But this is a 1966 Kennedy half-dollar, and there's one important detail you should understand before you ever put one back into circulation. The 1966 Kennedy half-dollar came from a remarkable period in American history. The United States was deep into the Vietnam War. The country was dealing with a major coin shortage, and Americans were changing the way they used cash. Because of that shortage, the mint temporarily stopped placing mint marks on certain coins, including the Kennedy half-dollar. So the absence of a mint mark on this date is completely normal, not a mint error. And this coin has another fascinating connection to that period. It was produced during the second year of the Kennedy half-dollar's 40% silver era. The regular 1966 issue had a reported mintage of 108,984,932 pieces. Look at the obverse, and you'll see President John F. Kennedy facing left. Around his portrait are the inscriptions, "Liberty, in God we trust," and the date, 1966. There is no mint mark beneath Kennedy's portrait. On the reverse, you'll find the presidential seal, with an eagle holding arrows and an olive branch surrounded by stars. The inscriptions read, United States of America, $50, and Pluribus Unum. The design was created by two important American coin artists. Gilroy Roberts designed Kennedy's portrait on the obverse, while Frank Gasparo designed the presidential seal reverse. Now check the metal. This is where the 1966 issue becomes especially interesting. It is a 40% silver Kennedy $50, with silver and copper bonded together in layers. The coin weighs approximately 11.5 grams, measures about 30.61 millimeters in diameter, is roughly 2.1 millimeters thick, and has a reeded edge with about 150 reeds. It also contains approximately 0.1479 troy ounces of pure silver. But don't confuse an old silver coin with an automatically rare coin. This was a standard issue, and more than 108 million were produced. In circulated grades, examples are generally available. The real survival challenge appears at the highest mint state grades, where truly clean, attractive examples become much harder to find. PCGS notes that the issue is common through lower mint state grades, but becomes scarce in the very highest grades. That's why your coin's extra fine condition deserves a close inspection. Look first at Kennedy's hair, cheek, jaw, and the lettering. Then examine the eagle, shield, feathers, stars, and the highest points on the reverse. Those black and brown areas should also be examined carefully. Collectors want to know whether the surfaces are original, naturally toned, environmentally affected, scratched, or previously cleaned. And now comes the number that makes this 1966 Kennedy $50 worth a much closer look. From an original face value of only 50 cents, this Kennedy $50 1966, with no mint mark, can be valued at approximately $72,780 based on the market value you provided. Collectors consider condition, surviving examples, originality, historical importance, and demand when evaluating a coin. There is an important reality check, though. Documented market records for ordinary examples are dramatically lower. PCGS lists an auction record of $15,105 for an exceptionally graded S67 Plus example. That shows why a claimed high valuation should never be treated as automatic. Authentication, precise grading, and the coin's actual condition are critical. So if you discover a 1966 Kennedy $50, do not spend this coin. Never clean it. Those black and brown surfaces may not look perfect, but original surfaces matter, and cleaning can permanently reduce collector appeal. Protect it carefully, handle it by the edges, and professional grading may be worthwhile if the coin appears unusually well preserved. Before you dismiss that old $50 as ordinary, check the date, inspect the surfaces, and remember what that missing mint mark actually means. Sometimes the detail you expect to see is valuable, precisely because it isn't there. And stay with me, because the next Kennedy $50 in this series could give you another reason to search through those old coins sitting in your collection right now. Coin number 5. Here's a Kennedy $50 that deserves a second look for one very specific reason. 1980 was the first year Philadelphia Kennedy $50 carried the P mint mark. So when you see a 1980 Kennedy $50 with that tiny P beneath Kennedy's portrait, you're looking at a small but important change in the history of the series. The 1980 Kennedy $50 arrived during a fascinating moment in America. Jimmy Carter was president, the country was dealing with high inflation and energy concerns, and the decade was about to enter a completely different economic and cultural era. At the same time, Kennedy $50 were becoming less common in everyday transactions, making them increasingly interesting to people who saved coins rather than spent them. On the obverse, President John F. Kennedy faces left. Around his portrait are the inscriptions, "Liberty, in God we trust," and the date, 1980. Just below Kennedy's portrait is the P Mint mark identifying the Philadelphia Mint. And remember that detail. The P is significant because 1980 was the first year Philadelphia placed its mint mark on Kennedy $50. Turn the coin over and you'll find the presidential seal. The eagle holds arrows in one claw and an olive branch in the other, with stars surrounding the design. The reverse carries the inscriptions United States of America, $50, and E Pluribus Unum. The Kennedy portrait was designed by Gilroy Roberts, while Frank Gasparo created the reverse design. By this point, the Kennedy $50 was no longer made from silver. The 1980 with P issue is copper-nickel clad, consisting of 75% copper and 25% nickel over a pure copper center. It weighs approximately 11.3 grams, measures about 30.61 millimeters in diameter, and is roughly 2.15 millimeters thick. Its edge is reeded with approximately 150 reeds. The Philadelphia Mint produced 44,134,1980 P Kennedy $50. That sounds like a huge number, and it is important to be realistic. This is a standard issue coin, not a rare mint error or unusual variety. PCGS considers the issue common through about MS-65, while very high-grade examples become increasingly difficult to locate. Now look carefully at the coin you have. Those black and green dots and the brown layer should not immediately be treated as evidence of rarity. Instead, collectors examine what is happening underneath and around those areas. Is the surface original? Has the coin been exposed to environmental conditions? Are there scratches or signs of cleaning? How much detail remains on Kennedy's hair, cheek, and jaw? On the reverse, inspect the eagle, feathers, shield, stars, and lettering. Condition is especially important. A circulated coin with noticeable surface problems is very different from an exceptionally preserved mint state example. Attractive original examples become harder to find as you move toward the highest grades, which is where serious collectors can become much more competitive. And now comes the number that makes this 1980 Kennedy $50 worth a much closer look. From an original face value of just 50 cents, a Kennedy $50 1980 with the P Mint mark, like the example you provided, has a stated current market value of approximately $40,500. Collectors consider condition, surviving examples, originality, historical importance, and demand when evaluating a coin at this level. But here's the important reality check. Documented auction records are much lower for ordinary examples. Reports an auction record of $3,840 for a certified MS-64 example sold by Heritage Auctions in August 2024. A PCGS MS-67 Plus example sold for $1,320 at Stack's Bowers in June 2025. That difference tells you exactly why professional evaluation matters. A claimed value is not the same thing as a guaranteed selling price. Grade, authentication, eye appeal, originality, and actual market demand can completely change what a specific coin brings. So if you find a 1980 with P Kennedy $50, do not spend this coin. Never clean it. Do not scrub away those black, green, or brown areas trying to make the coin shine. Original surfaces matter, and cleaning can permanently hurt collector appeal. Hold it carefully by the edges, protect it from further damage, and professional grading may be worthwhile if the coin appears unusually well preserved. Before you toss that old half-dollar into a spending pile, check the date, check for that important P-mint mark, and inspect both sides under good lighting. One tiny letter can tell you something important about where and when your Kennedy half-dollar was made. And that brings us to the end of this Kennedy half-dollar journey. If you have old half-dollars sitting in a drawer, collection, or inherited coin box, now is the time to check them carefully. You never know which forgotten coin deserves a closer look. Comment "Rare Coins Hunter" if you're still watching. I want to know who the real treasure hunters are. Coin number 6. There are some Kennedy half-dollars you can recognize instantly, and then there are coins that make you stop, turn them over, and check the date one more time. This is one of those coins. We're looking at a 1964 Kennedy half-dollar with the D mint mark, brown and black spots, and a beautiful uncirculated appearance. And the reason this particular date gets collectors' attention starts with something hiding in the metal itself. 1964 was the very first year the Kennedy half-dollar entered circulation. America was still grieving the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, and Congress authorized the new half-dollar just weeks afterward. The coin became an immediate piece of American history. That same year, the United States was preparing for a presidential election. The civil rights movement was reshaping the nation, and the space race was accelerating. So this is not just an old half-dollar, it represents the beginning of an iconic American coin series. On the obverse, Kennedy faces left in the famous presidential portrait created by Gilroy Roberts. Around him are the inscriptions, "Liberty, in God we trust," and the date 1964. Because this is the Denver issue, look for the small D mint mark on the reverse, beneath the olive branch and above the rim. That tiny letter identifies the Denver Mint. Turn it over, and the presidential seal takes center stage. You'll see the eagle holding arrows and an olive branch surrounded by stars. The inscriptions read, "United States of America, half-dollar, and E pluribus unum." The reverse was designed by Frank Gasparo. Now here is the part that makes the 1964 issue especially important. This was the only regular Kennedy half-dollar date struck in 90% silver. The remaining 10% was copper. The coin weighs approximately 12.5 grams, measures about 30.6 millimeters across, is roughly 2 millimeters thick, and has a reeded edge. The Denver Mint produced 156,205,446 examples. That mintage means we should be careful with the word rare. A regular 1964 with D. Kennedy half-dollar is not automatically rare simply because it is old or contains silver. Millions were produced, and circulated examples remain available. What becomes much more difficult to find are coins preserved at exceptional grades, especially pieces with strong, original surfaces and outstanding eye appeal. PCGS records an auction record of $22,325 for an MS-68 example. And that brings us to the coin you're looking at. Those brown and black spots should not automatically be treated as evidence of rarity. Collectors want to know exactly what caused the surface appearance. Is the toning natural? Is there environmental damage? Are there scratches hidden beneath the discoloration? Has the coin ever been cleaned? These questions can dramatically affect the final grade and desirability. If this example truly has an uncirculated, beautiful appearance, inspect Kennedy's cheek, hair, jawline, and the open fields for contact marks. Then examine the reverse carefully, especially the eagle, shield, feathers, stars, and lettering. On a high-grade coin, even small marks can matter. And now comes the number that makes this 1964 Kennedy half-dollar worth a much closer look. From an original face value of only 50 cents, A Kennedy half-dollar 1964 with the D mint mark, like the example you provided, has a stated current market value of approximately $78,600. Collectors consider condition, surviving examples, originality, historical importance, and demand when evaluating a coin. But remember, that stated value should not be confused with a guaranteed selling price. Actual documented auction results can vary enormously by grade and certification. For example, PCGS records the regular 1,964 with D auction record at $22,325 in MS68, while other certified examples have sold for dramatically less. So if you discover one of these coins, do not spend this coin. Never clean it. Do not polish away the brown or black areas just because you think a brighter surface looks better. Original surfaces matter, and cleaning can permanently damage collector value. Handle it only by the edges. Keep it protected, and professional grading may be worthwhile if the coin appears genuinely uncirculated and exceptionally preserved. Before you put that old Kennedy half-dollar back into a box, check the date, check for the D mint mark, and look closely at every part of the surface. This was the first Kennedy half-dollar and the first and only regular issue of the series struck in 90% silver. If you've been checking your collection along with me, now is the time to go through those old half-dollars again. One overlooked coin could be the one that makes you wish you had looked twice. Comment Rare Coins Hunter if you're still watching. I want to know who the real treasure hunters are.